Ethan had always been a night owl, his eyes glued to the screen, fingers rhythmically tapping the keys as his avatar moved through a pixelated world. It wasn't unusual for him to lose track of time, but tonight felt different. There was something about the game, something that didn't sit right with him. It all started when he downloaded the new horror game, The Abyss. The reviews were glowing. People raving about the innovative mechanics, the terrifying atmosphere, and the psychological twists. But Ethan wasn't prepared for what awaited him. As the game loaded, a message popped up: "You're not alone." Ethan chuckled, brushing it off. It was probably some gimmick. He had seen plenty of jump scares in his time. He clicked start, his screen flickering briefly before plunging into darkness. The game setting was eerie, a dilapidated mansion filled with cobwebs, creaking doors, and hallways that seemed to stretch longer than they should. But it was the sound that really got to him: distorted whispers, footsteps echoing in the distance, and an unsettling, mechanical hum that seemed to follow him no matter where he went. Ethan wasn't new to horror games. In fact, he relished them. The challenge, the adrenaline, it was a thrill. But this felt different. As he explored the mansion, the environment became more surreal. The walls pulsated, rooms shifted position, and objects disappeared only to reappear somewhere else. It was as if the game was playing tricks on him, testing his sanity. The first warning came when he tried to save the game. He'd played for hours, and he was starting to get tired. He navigated to the in-game menu to save his progress. The button didn't respond. His fingers pressed harder, more urgently, but it was like the system had frozen. A chilling message popped up instead: "You're not allowed to leave." Ethan's heart rate quickened. This was definitely not normal. He looked around the screen for some sort of glitch, but nothing seemed out of place. He tried again. Nothing. He shook his head and reached for the mouse, but his hand hovered. Something felt off. He could swear the room behind him had gotten darker, and the shadows seemed to move, shifting in ways they shouldn't. A sound, soft, almost inaudible, came from his speakers. It was a whisper. "Ethan." He froze, his hand hovering above the mouse, as the whisper grew louder. "Ethan, play with us." His heart hammered in his chest. He spun around in his chair. The room behind him was still the same, his desk cluttered with empty cans and his flickering monitor casting a cold light across the dark room. He laughed nervously and turned back to the screen, dismissing it as his mind playing tricks on him. But then, the game changed again. The mansion on the screen began to distort. The walls cracked, blood-red tendrils snaked across the floor, and the floorboards began to pulse with a sickening rhythm. His avatar, once standing tall, was now crouched, shaking. Then, something in the game looked directly at him. The avatar's eyes weren't supposed to move. Yet, there it was, its face twisting with what could only be described as a smile. The character's mouth opened wide, too wide, far too wide, and the distorted whispers began again. "Come play, come deeper, we're waiting for you." Ethan's breath caught in his throat as the screen began to glitch. He slammed his hands against the keyboard, trying to close the game, but it wouldn't budge. He clicked Alt plus F4 repeatedly, but nothing happened. The game's characters, once far away, were now close, their faces contorting into grotesque, monstrous forms. The walls of the mansion began to bleed. The whispers were louder now, surrounding him. "We can see you, you can't escape, we will come for you." Suddenly, the screen flickered, then turned black. Ethan sat back, gasping for breath. Sweat trickled down his face. What the hell was going on? As he reached to pull the plug on his computer, the screen came back to life, this time, showing his own face. He blinked in confusion. How could the game know what he looked like? The camera on his laptop, which he'd turned off hours ago, was showing his reflection, but his eyes were not his own. They were different. The reflection on the screen grinned. "It's not over, Ethan." His body froze, his heart racing. He clicked the mouse again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He powered off the computer. The screen went dark, and the room fell silent. For a moment, Ethan sat in the dark, breathing heavily. He stood up and walked toward his bedroom door, wanting nothing more than to sleep it off, forget about the game. Then, the sound came again. A whisper, coming from the screen, even though the computer was off. "You can't escape, Ethan." His breath caught in his throat, and he turned, feeling a chill sweep through him. He grabbed the handle of his bedroom door, his hands trembling. Something was wrong. He opened the door, and there, standing in the hallway, was his avatar from the game. A twisted, monstrous version of himself, with its grin stretching impossibly wide. "Play with us." His body went numb, and the door slammed shut behind him. Ethan never made it out. They say his screams were heard late into the night, but when anyone arrived, there was no sign of him. Only a dark, empty room with a computer screen glowing faintly in the corner. And on the screen was the same twisted grin, staring back at anyone who dared to look. The game, they say, is still out there. Waiting for someone else to download it. Waiting for someone else to play. And once you start, you never leave.